Good morning and welcome to another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame. I'm Robert Phoenix. Just checking my levels here, making sure that they're all leveled up. They're all leveled up, leveled up, leveled up, leveled up. How is that? How is that? Are we in the red? Sibilance. And I think that's going to be pushing the volume today a little bit. How is everybody? I'm going to stand up. I'm going to do today's show standing up. I'm in a fighting mood. I'm going to Alex Jones your ass today. No, really, I stand up because it's better for my back. So there's a lot going on out there, and we're going to do our best to cover as much of it as we can over the next 30 minutes. I have a new post up on my website, and it has to do with Harvey and some of the astrological aspects, which are quite interesting as it relates to the city of Houston. And one of the singular figures that has really stood out during this rescue effort and the rehabilitation and rebuilding of Houston, which will take a very long time, is a fellow by the name of J.J. Watt. And J.J. Watt is a larger-than-life character. He's kind of like a version of Babe Ruth and Paul Bunyan and Roddy Piper, all kind of rolled up into one. And he's also a millennial. How about that? And J.J. Watt has been an incredible football player. He's one of the few people playing professional football over the course of his career that has the ability to change a game single-handedly. And I've seen him do it. And he can put a team on his back, and he's that dominant. He plays in the defense, but every now and then he'll slip in and play on the other side of the ball and play a little tight end. He's from Wisconsin. He has two other brothers that play in the NFL, Ted Watt and TJ Watt. So he comes from a football-playing family. And he decided, because he lives down in Houston, he decided that he wanted to help in the effort to rebuild and assist and do anything he could for the residents of Houston who'd had their lives turned upside down and inside out by this massive storm. And he created a fund, and his goal was to raise $200,000. J.J. Watt's up to over $20 million right now. $20 million. That's that's a fair amount of money. It's not $200 million. But $20 million could be very helpful for a number of families. I mean, if we did the math and you get $100,000 10 times, right? So that would be, let's see. That would be what, 20, 10 times. That would be about 200 people. If you right, is that right? 200 people for $100,000? No, it'd be more than that. Anyway, I'm not great right now with the math, but if you distributed that across a number of people, even if it was like $20,000, people could pay off their cars and get their cars back, or people could have temporary shelter. I mean, that money needs to be dispersed, and I hope that they do a good job doing it. And it just doesn't get forked over to the Red Cross, who have come out and said openly that they cannot guarantee that the money that they're getting will go to Harvey, because that's how the Red Cross rolls, right? That's how they do their thing. No guarantee. Is Ben Bernanke in charge of the Red Cross now? Remember Ben Bernanke? Remember him? Yeah, that was the guy who basically oversaw the greatest theft, the greatest economic theft in the history of the United States, perhaps even the world. Remember when Bernanke went in front of Congress and said he didn't know where the money went? He didn't know how it was going to be used. But it was also important to get that money. These people need to hang. I'm serious. I'm totally serious. Timothy Geithner, remember him? Where are these people now? Where are they now? Would you even be able to pick Timothy Geithner out in a crowd? Oh, look, it's Tim Geithner. Let's go kick his ass. No, would you be able to do that? You couldn't pick Tim Geithner out. If you could, and boy, you've got too much time in your hands, truly. But there's another guy who oversaw the theft. What about Larry Summers? He's still around. Of course, Larry Summers still has a political voice. You wouldn't be able to pick him out either. Anyway, there's $20 million, and it's going to people, hopefully, who have suffered at the tragedy of this storm. And there's another storm brewing out there on the Caribbean side of things. It's gotten so intense that the possibility of it hitting landfall has caused the National Football League to not have one of its games to be played this weekend. That's the Miami Dolphins and the Tampa Bay Bucks. Their game has been postponed. And they will be replaying that game, just in case you're a Dolphins or a Bucks fan, in Week 11. In the meantime, guess what? There's Irma sitting there gathering force in the Caribbean. Before I talk about Irma, before I transition into that, and I'm going to read a piece from Dane Wigington and the Weather Wars, and from his geoengineering.com site. I want to just touch base one more time with this whole J.J. Watt thing, because one of the things that has been front and center, for the last 4 years, maybe, and really heating up since the election of one Donald J. Trump, is the fact that people like myself, a 56-year-old white male, we are at the epicenter of all the world's tragedies. You can place the burden of just about everything upon our shoulders, that the world is in the state that it's in because we created it and we abused everybody and indentured the entire planet. So simply by being born into a body with a genetic code that made me a white middle class, barely middle class, white middle-aged male, I am the source, or we are the source of society's ills and evils. And that trickles down. It goes into not just sort of my demographic, which, by the way, has the highest suicide rate out of any demographic in this country, but it trickles down just to the whole idea of males in general, and the demonization of males and masculine energy. And it's not hard to sort of track it. Now, that wild, untamed masculine energy certainly can have its place and context and come out if you're wearing a black hooded mask and you're hunting down fascists. Well, in that case, your masculine energy is okay. So go crack some heads. Go tap into your testosterone and beat the hell out of a conservative or Trump supporter or middle-aged white guy. Then it's okay. Other than that, just shut it down, turn it off, and stick your nuts between your legs. Now, here's the thing about J.J. Watt. He comes in and, guess what? Busts the narrative. Right? Here's a guy who is opening his heart, huge heart. He's working out. He's trying to come back from a back injury. He's already a legend in Houston. And what does he do? He puts the pedal to the metal, 0 degrees Aries, jumps into action, doesn't hesitate. Boom, $20 million. Busts the narrative. He's white. He's a male. He's got testosterone. He's a football player. Everything that is marginalized to the point of demonization, he basically qualifies for it, except he's a bit young. He's a millennial. And what does he do? He steps up. Doesn't care, doesn't matter. You know, it's Houston, the most racially diverse city in the United States, maybe the world. You think J.J. Watt is going to sit there and say, listen, I know we've got $20 million, but let's give like, I don't know, $15 million to the white families. And then let's give the other $5 million to split that up. $5 million is a lot, just split it up. You think he's going to do that? No. So when these things happen, it's important to shine a little light so that we can balance the ledger sheet of the insanity of the world that we're currently living in. So props to you, J.J. Watt, and props to anybody else, by the way, that's happening. You know, props to Michael Bennett, who has have this ongoing sort of protest for the National Football League and America in general. Michael Bennett, this is what storms do. They unify people. Michael Bennett stepped up and said, I'm going to throw down $25,000. My wife is from Houston. My family's from Houston. I grew up in Louisiana, but my family. So Michael Bennett stepped up. This is what happens. You know, it's the triangulation of disaster. That's what it is. It's a triangulation of disaster. Whether it's a war, whether it's a storm, whether it's an alien invasion, all of a sudden we're not fighting against one another. We're actually using our resources together towards some common effort and some common goal, which has unfortunately been cast out in this country a long, long time ago. So let's get into what's happening next with Irma. This is from Dane Wigington's website, who's had 27 million visitors to date. That's pretty impressive. I had Dane on the show. I really like Dane. I don't know what happened with him in the geoengineering community, but they turned on him. They think he's an insider. They think he's a shill. I don't have any comment or opinion on that. Clearly, he's got a background in engineering and science, so he comes from the inside, but I'm not going to make any kind of assumption or assertion about Dane Wigington. But I will read this from his website. This is from today, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just check the date. Yesterday. So he says, Hurricane Harvey brought an abrupt and catastrophic end to the 12-year-long major hurricane landfall drought in the U.S. That's 12 years. Remember, the Gulf Stream corrupted. Were climate engineering programs a factor in the Harvey disaster scenario? Available data has already made clear the answer is yes. How much decimation will the manipulation of Hurricane Irma inflict? The U.S. government has been actively engaged in hurricane modification programs for a minimum of 70 years. It's the weaponization of the weather. Historical documents, he's got a link there. I'll put this link in the YouTube page. Maybe I'll put it in the Spreaker page too. Historical documents prove this fact conclusively. Yet, the power structure, controlled circles of academia and corporate media continue to fuel total denial of the climate engineering hurricane modification reality. This should not be a surprise. How much decimation have global engineering/weather warfare programs already caused? What are the primary objectives and agendas? How much worse will it get? The short video below provides verifiable data to confirm that climate engineering is a reality and exposes some of the primary objectives. Again, I'll put this link. I'll make sure to put this link in the YouTube description of the show. Exposing and halting the ongoing climate engineering/weather warfare /biological warfare assault is the greatest imperative of our time. Tasked by raising an army of the awakened by reaching a critical mass. The most effective way of accomplishing this is by sharing credible and compelling data with family, friends, organizations, agencies, elected officials. The list is endless. Only when enough of the population realizes that the fight to expose and halt climate engineering is a fight for life do we stand a chance of bringing these programs to a stop. Let's see. This is sometimes the comments are very intriguing. Let me read this one. This is a guy by the name of Mark. This is on Dane's site. I have a friend who is a commercial airline pilot, Delta I'm pretty sure, but who also plays of all things the bluegrass mandolin. How about that? He texted me today and asked if I wanted to get together to pick. That's code for jam. I agreed, and I will see him next week. I'm a professional fiddler, folks. I had a run-in with this feller. This guy's a pretty folksy guy, isn't he? About a year ago when I had a few margaritas. I confronted him on what he knows about SRM, whether or not he knows if Delta Fleet is retrofitted with spraying equipment, and or what his opinion of the massive degradation and obscuration of the atmosphere due to spraying. Well, you guessed it. Total deer in the headlights. He actually contended that he didn't notice anything unusual, and that the idea that a massive spraying program is underway is absurd. I now live in the same town as him, but didn't back then. When he comes over, he's going to get Dane's new brochure. Anyway, that comment is apparently some insight into the fact that pilots are not aware of what the hell's going on up there. So we're looking at another massive hurricane, and it's headed towards the direction of the Caribbean and Key West. Apparently people in the Virgin Islands are grabbing guns ahead of time. What do we have here? Let me just grab this. Block that. Okay, so now we're not going to get this. Hold on. Yeah, that's not what I'm looking for. Okay, here we go. This is from RT. It says the Navy evacuates over 5,000 personnel from Florida base ahead of Hurricane Irma. So it's getting serious. If you're living down in southern Florida, which is a very difficult place to get out of. I mean, if you're living down in Key West and you're trying to get out of there, or Miami's probably a little easier, but that stretch from Key West to Miami is like nearly impossible. Nearly impossible. I hate the new internet where they just have the pop-up ads and start playing while you're reading something. Just obnoxious shit. So Joint Task Force Guantanamo is closely monitoring the progress of Irma and is taking appropriate measures to ensure the safety of the detainees. I'm sure the detainees are thinking, please let this storm blow this hellhole away so we can get the hell out of here. Plans and procedures are in place to ensure safety for detainees throughout this event. Department of Defense spokesman Ben Sackerson said, the Naval Submarine Base in Kings Bay in Georgia has submarines that have been evacuated or preparing to be evacuated. Other Navy installations may be ordered to evacuate in the coming days. Unidentified naval officials have told CNN that aircraft, including fixed-wing planes and helicopters, will move inland from Mayport in Jacksonville, Florida. Jacksonville, Florida is fairly high it's not that high. It's, I'm thinking of Tallahassee. Tallahassee's right there at the tip of Florida. So anyway, we have this new storm coming in, Irma, massive. I think it's a class 5 now. It became a class 5 on Tuesday, and could be one of the strongest in recorded history on the Atlantic seaboard. We've got the Virgin Islands, the Caribbean Islands, Puerto Rico, and they'll be in the path of Irma. So we've had plenty of devastation already with Harvey, and now we're at stage 2. They say things come in threes, and I've heard that there's another storm that is behind Irma that they're fermenting. So again, what are we going to do about this? I mean, these people have insane technology that allows them to basically control the weather of the planet. Why would they not think that they're gods? If they can brew hurricanes, if they can steer them, if they can create drought conditions in a place like California for almost 2 years, if they can subvert or reroute that weather front and drop it down into the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico and then reroute it into Texas, where Texas had record rain for 3 years, why wouldn't they think that they're godlike? I mean, they've got control of the weather on the planet. Is it full and total meteorological domination? I don't know. But it feels like it. It absolutely feels like it. I mean, this is the first time we've had hurricanes in 12 years. And I've said it before, it's because the Gulf Stream has been corrupted. And has been for a long time. So, there we go. Another thing for us to deal with. It's okay though. It's alright. It's really okay. You're here, we're all here now, and we're all doing our best to be switched on and awake and alert and conscious and aware. And it's not always easy. Am I right? It's not always easy. So we have to give ourselves some credit sometimes. And we have to give ourselves some credit for being able to at least navigate this thing this far without going completely mad and insane. Although that is starting to happen, and we talked a little bit about that yesterday with the death of Joel Mitchell. A little bit of feedback has come out, or it's information, not even feedback, information about who Joel Mitchell was, and apparently we don't know these things entirely, but apparently he had a bit of a history of self-harm when he was high on hallucinogenics. So perhaps it wasn't in Joel Mitchell's best interest to go to Burning Man and take whatever hallucinogenics they were engaged with that night, because it certainly was a tragic end to his life. He was 41 years old, and he'd been living in Europe and doing construction work. He seemed, by all accounts, like a very happy-go-lucky guy. He was a clown. He was a jokester. This is what people have said about him. And who knows? I mean, certainly it was a archetypal event, and really, for all intents and purposes, does pass for a human sacrifice in many ways. So I'm sure his parents are stunned, and the people that know and love him are stunned. Can you imagine that? Let's just break that down for a second. Because he was there with a group of people, and you know that they were high too. Right? They probably all dosed on acid, and who knows what else they were taking. And here's Joel going into the flames and ultimately dying. And you're part of that group, and you're high. Okay? You're totally high. You're high. So you're high in acid. You're at Burning Man, and this guy that you know, have been bonding with, maybe you've known him for a while, and he showed up there, and all of a sudden, he's thrown himself into the fire, and you're tripping your brains out. How's that reality? One of the people who was there, who's kind of an eyewitness or inside that group, said there was a woman who, after the aftermath of it all, after they air vac them out, they all got back to their little base camp, and he said that there was a woman there who cried in a way like he had never heard anything before. It was probably an incredibly deep lament for the suffering of our times, which is it's not great. It is not great. It is amped up, let me tell you. So just a little follow-up, just to give you some understanding about who he was and maybe some of his background, so we just don't drop down the memory hole and forget what we talked about 24 hours ago or 48 hours ago or last week or last month. John Podesta. But we're at a time now where it's not just weather that has been weaponized, the culture has been weaponized. The culture has been weaponized. It's almost as if we've become, that humanity in and of itself is like a sleeper cell. Because we all have our shadows, and we all have our demons, and we all have these places inside of ourselves that we have not really been able to resolve for the most part. Whether it's trauma from a marriage, whether it's trauma from a childhood, whether it's trauma from high school, whatever that is, it's in there. And those traumas, they're like little demons. Trauma is the place where these interdimensional entities hook into us. Because that's where we're weak. That's where we can be moved around through our trauma. And by not addressing it, by not dealing with it, by not looking it squarely in the eyes, by not doing the hard spiritual work, which is having to go through at times very, very painful moments of evisceration and anger and grief and forgiveness and redemption and the cleansing tears of our soul welcoming us back home, that trauma sticks around, and it turns us into these sleeper cells that are activated by social codes and social programming. Let me give you an example of this. This is, if I can find it. Let me get into this. Okay. So this is from the Daily Caller, and it's from August, the end of August, the 31st. And here's a guy by the name of Frederick DeMond Scott. He's 22 years old. He's from Kansas City, and he'd gone on record where he wanted to say he wanted to kill all white people. And he was charged with murdering 2 middle-aged white men and suspected of killing 3 more. It says Frederick DeMond Scott was charged Tuesday in the murders of Stephen Gibbons and John Palmer. Gibbons, a 57-year-old Kansas City man, was found dead August 14th after being shot in the back, just getting off of a city bus. Video footage showed an unidentified black man also exiting the bus and following Gibbons just before he was shot. Evidence found at the scene of the murder led police to Scott, a former Burger King employee who's had a few run-ins with the law. They had a DNA match, and the DNA was found on it. It was a cigarette that he had discarded, Scott, outside of a Kansas City gas station. DNA was also found on a T-shirt left at the scene on August 19th, 2016, the murder of Palmer. They've got 3 other killings that they're looking at. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because Frederick DeMond Scott was probably at one time a little kid. I mean, we know he was a little kid, but probably, ran around and played games and had friends and did all the stuff that little kids do. And somewhere along the way, probably experienced a high degree of trauma, whether it was a broken family or who knows. But, and we all get it to some degree or another. You can't get out of this life without getting nicked up. It's just the way it is. So he's got something in his background. He's got something in his life. And then what happens is that trauma, triggered by the social codes, triggered by the social manipulation, social engineering, now it's become in fashion, in vogue to take your trauma out on unsuspecting people just because they match a profile. Now, there might be people that say, well, guess what? This is what police do all the time. They profile. They go after the black community, and I agree with that. They do, and they, and I don't believe it's a great practice, to be honest with you. This is not a great practice. Profiling sucks. Just there's no two ways about it. But here we go. This guy, Frederick DeMond Scott, ultimately was a sleeper cell. And it was his trauma that triggered his codes. Just like Jason Bourne in the Bourne Supremacy. And there's variations of this, right? There are variations of this. There was a woman recently who decided that she was going to kill the young man who raped her daughter. And that's what she did. She knew that this guy had raped her daughter when her daughter was 6 years old. I don't know how old he was. He was maybe preteen or teen, pre-adult. And she lured him into the woods with another guy, and she offed him. And then she called the cops, said she did it. Now she's going to spend a large part of her rest of her life in jail. This is what's going on. This is what's happening. And the trauma it's horrible. It's horrific. And if we don't deal with it, if we can't deal with it, it comes up and essentially becomes weaponized, and we're taken over by something else. So I'm not saying that everybody's a sleeper cell, but we have that potential in our society because we don't have these. We haven't had any resolution. We haven't had any closure. We haven't had any real redemption in our lives. And even when we do, what happens? The next thing gets piled on top of it. And so now we're dealing and reeling with something else. Not even in our own lives, but in the collective sense. So, remember, there is a center of the storm in the hurricane. That's what it is. You got to find the center of the storm. If you can be the center of the storm, you can get through these times. And it doesn't matter what your background is, doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, it doesn't matter. And none of it matters. None of it matters. The only thing that matters is if you get right with your soul and your spirit and your relationship with Prime Creator, God. That's it. You get there to the best of your ability, and you've got a chance of having the best navigational systems possible and available to you. That's where it's at. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we were all on the same page? So that we weren't at the other end of the social manipulation and the social programming and the social trauma. Wouldn't it be wonderful? Hopefully one day we will be. But until then, you just have to stay strong and stay clear and stay in the game. Stay in the game. The game is an interesting one for sure, and the stakes are getting higher and higher each time. By the way, did you catch that Moon, the guy from South Korea, and somebody from North Korea went to Russia to meet with Putin? Have you seen that? That's a little known factoid news piece. And I'm not here to prop up Putin as some great statesman. But it's interesting that there was kind of a diplomatic overture taking place. What would happen if Russia brokered a peace deal between North and South Korea? What about that? Wouldn't that just be the wild card in all of this? And now all of a sudden, all these generals are scratching their nuts, getting outflanked by Putin. Once again, just like Putin outflanked him when Assad was supposed to have the chemical rockets and the chemical warheads, and the Russians said, we'll take them. They're ours. We'll take responsibility for them. And they did, and it got taken right off the table, and the United States could not use that as a pretext for more open aggression against Assad and the Syrian people. I mean, he just completely outplayed John Kerry and Obama just by doing that. Is that happening again in North and South Korea? Keep your eyes on that. That's a big news story that could really break wide open. All right, let's get out of here. I'll see you guys 24 hours from today. And you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step into what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. All you people down in Florida and the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, Cuba, everybody down in that part of our world, take good care of yourself. If you can get out, it's probably a good idea to do that. Maybe it was a better idea to do that about 3 days ago. But if you're still there, hang in there, and we send our prayers out to you and hope that you weather the storm, no matter how big or how bad or how long it takes. And remember, the storm is metaphorical. It's our storm too. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day. I'm Robert Phoenix.